Hello, and welcome to my page. My name is Jess. I'm the owner/HBIC of Skeleton Crew Creations. Just a little bit about myself and what to expect in my video today. I run my own small business. I make candles by hand as well as some other products. While I complete some errands, I will be discussing some true crime cases. Today will be about Ed Gein. And congratulations, this is my very first video. I love reading and learning about unique and difficult cases. Many of them are based around serial killers and their psyche. Just a disclaimer, I am not a psychologist nor a psychiatrist. I've just always had an interest in the subjects and read about psychiatric disorders and significant criminal cases during my free time. Psychopathy is a very complex aspect of psychiatry to learn about. It is a misconception that all psychopaths are serial killers or murderers. Antisocial personality disorder is the actual diagnosis for most psychopaths. And there is a percentage of people that are actually diagnosed, yet not criminally insane. Many of them are quite successful CEOs and investment bankers. But what makes them into the monsters we read about or watch in movies? Is it nature or nurture? That's the question that's always on my mind when researching. So let's start scratching the surface with an iconic yet not well-known case. You may know about Leatherface, the demented chainsaw-wielding killer in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. But every fictional monster has a factual origin, and this origin arises in the heartland of America. Today we're diving into the twisted story of one of the most disturbing figures in American crime history, Ed Gein, a man whose gruesome acts would inspire some of the most infamous horror films of all time. There once was a man named Ed who wouldn't take a woman to bed. When he wanted to diddle, he cut out the middle and hung up the rest in his shed. Edward Theodore Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin. His childhood? Far from normal. Ed's mother, Augusta Gein, was a fear-mongering Lutheran who often preached and abided by the law of the Holy Bible. Augusta lived along the premise that working is the fulfillment of life. That joy does not come from pleasure, but from strictly hard work and accomplishment. Augusta would also preach to Ed and his brother that women were evil and devil-like. Much like that scene in the movie The Waterboy, where Adam Sandler's character Bobby Boucher is constantly told by his mother that women are the devil. Kathy Bates' character in that movie is the perfect representation of Augusta Gein. Ed's father, George, worked as a carpenter and a tanner. For those that are unfamiliar, a tanner would process and tan animal hides. George's career choices may have influenced Ed in his future doings. When George wasn't working, he was hitting the bottle pretty hard on his off time. He would often abuse Ed and his older brother Henry, physically and mentally. The Gein family moved to Plainfield, Wisconsin when Ed was 8 years old. They lived on a 195-acre farm, which is mainly Augusta's doing. Augusta didn't want the boys being influenced by the outside world, especially any influences that went against her Lutheran beliefs. Although they were removed from the town, Ed and Henry did attend the town school. Ed was described as very quiet, socially awkward, and would laugh randomly at inappropriate situations. Doesn't that bring Joaquin Phoenix's title character in the movie Joker to mind? The Gein brothers would often go into town and work odd jobs to help support the family farm. Both were considered honest and reliable workers from the townspeople. The Gein brothers mainly did handyman-type work, such as minor home repairs. Surprisingly, Ed was hired as a babysitter by his neighbors. According to his clients, he worked very well as a children's babysitter. Now, we're going to fast forward to the 1940s. Several events on the Gein homestead would occur, drastically affecting Ed. On April Fool's Day in 1940, Ed's father passed away due to heart failure. 4 years later, on May 16, 1944, his brother Henry died while unsuccessfully trying to control a brush fire on the property. A rescue crew found his body hours later after the fire was contained. Henry's death was ruled as asphyxiation from smoke inhalation. However, some questions lingered regarding the circumstances of his death years later. Prior to his death, Henry was outspoken towards Augusta and her radical religious views of women. This was mainly because Henry had become smitten with a divorced woman in town. Henry even considered moving in with her. Ed, concerned for his brother's intentions, confronted Henry. When Henry's disdain of his mother became obvious to Ed, this shifted the relationship between the brothers. A later investigation into Henry's autopsy results revealed he had bruising to his head indicative of blunt force trauma. So, did Ed Gein kill his brother to claim his mother all to himself? Or was he upset at his brother for daring to disrespect their mother? After the deaths of George and Henry Gein, this left Ed and Augusta secluded from the rest of the town on their sprawling farm. But this wouldn't be for long. Shortly after Henry's death, Augusta suffered a stroke. Her health deteriorated rapidly after the loss of Henry. Augusta suffered a second stroke sometime afterward. On December 29, 1945, Augusta Gein died after suffering from complications of the previous strokes. This obviously devastated Ed Gein, leaving him alone from the rest of the world. No friends, no other relatives. He is even quoted stating he lost his only friend and one true love, and he was absolutely alone in the world. Naturally, something in Ed snapped. Losing his father and brother was one thing, but losing his mother significantly impacted Ed. The only woman in his life whom he believed in wholeheartedly. Augusta could do no wrong in Ed's eyes during their lives on their isolated farm together. She was the closest representation of God in Ed's eyes. And now, she's gone. Ed began to board up certain rooms in the house his mother frequented. Augusta's favorite areas in their simple home became a time capsule of a world where his mother was still alive. The rest of the house became squalid, nearly unlivable. Just to delve a little more into the mental psyche of Ed during this time of mourning, this is a typical reaction to death among those that may already have underlying mental health issues. Mourning is a quite difficult stressor that nearly everyone will experience at least once in his or her lives. Ever watch an episode of Hoarders? Each of those hoarders has dealt with a significantly stressful event. I was always curious about the exact symptom this was described, and finally came across it 10 years ago while reading one of my death investigation textbooks. Hoarding is actually directly correlated to Diogenes syndrome. The symptoms of Diogenes syndrome marks off every box on the hoarder checklist: squalid home conditions, social withdrawal, self-neglect, and impulsive hoarding. Some that suffer from the syndrome can hoard specific things such as animals, bottles, or even their own excrement. I can definitely confirm that there are different degrees of this syndrome. I've dealt with these situations for nearly my entire adult life, and it is a significant indicator of someone spiraling. So, if someone you love was a neat freak before, and now they're starting to become a little unkempt, check in on them. Okay, now back to Ed Gein. November 16th, 1957, the first day of deer hunting season. Frank Warden entered the doors of Warden Hardware to check on his mother, Bernice Warden, after a day of hunting. After finding the store counter unoccupied, Frank realized something was amiss since Bernice always monitored the store. Soon after, he saw a large pool of blood on the floor and realized something horrible occurred. He then contacted local authorities. Captain Schaforster of the Washoe County Sheriff's Department responded to the hardware store with Chief Deputy Arnie Fritz and Sheriff Artie Schley. When Frank was questioned as to who would harm his mother, he stated Ed Gein. According to Frank, Gein had been frequenting the store asking Bernice on a date to go roller skating. Like, Ed Gein is a roller skater. Go figure. Gein had been in the store as recently as the day before, asking about the price of antifreeze. On the very counter Bernice worked from, a handwritten receipt consistent with her style of writing was found, written for the sale of antifreeze. It was the last thing written by Bernice before her disappearance, becoming a crucial piece of evidence. Authorities went to the Gein residence to see if Ed was there, which at the time was unsuccessful. But what they did find would be the inspiration of horror movies for decades. While the deputies canvassed the vast farm spread, they came across a shed. On the typical first evening at the start of deer season, all household sheds become makeshift butcher shops. At the Gein household, it was just that, just not for deer. The deputies found Bernice Warden decapitated, gutted, and hung like a deer in the shed. She was hung upside down from her ankles on a crossbar with ropes tied around her wrists. Warden was described by deputies as dressed like a deer. But that was just the beginning. Deputies entered the Gein home, which exponentially worsened the reality of this horror. The Gein home was described as in shambles, with significant hoarding conditions and no electricity. While searching the location, they made numerous macabre findings. A decomposing head in a box, not belonging to Warden due to the advanced state of decomposition. A box full of vulvas, dining bowls made of sawed-off human skulls, lampshades made of human skin, a bodysuit made of human skin, specifically a corset of an entire female torso, and a pair of leggings, and I mean literally, a pair of leggings. Masks made from the skin of women's faces. Warden's head was found in a burlap sack. Her heart was also found on a plastic bag on the stovetop. Her intestines were wrapped in newspaper on the floor nearby. There were numerous other findings inside the Gein household, which indicated that Warden was not his first and only victim. Some of the biological evidence found at the Gein house was from women as young as 15 years old. The decomposing head in the box was later identified as Mary Hogan. Miss Hogan was reported missing 3 years before. The circumstances of her disappearance were a mirror image of Warden's death. Hogan was a barmaid in Plainfield who vanished from her place of employment. The investigation revealed that there was also a large pool of blood on the floor with a .22 caliber bullet casing in near proximity. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, numerous reports of missing persons were filed in Plainfield, but no bodies were ever found. An autopsy of Warden's remains revealed her primary cause of death as a single gunshot wound to the head, with a .22 caliber bullet recovered from her skull. There was also secondary trauma to her body, indicating signs of blunt force trauma while she was still alive. Her death followed soon after. All of the horrific mutilations occurred after her death. Despite the horrid conditions of the household, one room stood still in time: Augusta Gein's room. Authorities entered the boarded-up room, perfectly preserved in situ 12 years ago before her death. Ed Gein was placed under arrest after he was located outside his neighbor's home. Ed had just finished an odd job. An interrogation was not conducted the night of his apprehension due to the physical handling of Ed by the arresting deputy. Ed was transported to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, where he confessed to the murders of Warden and Hogan the next day. During his interrogation, he also confessed to grave robbing, further explaining the numerous trophies he acquired in his home. A search of the local cemetery revealed numerous graves were vandalized, missing either entire bodies or parts of them. Ed never admitted to any acts of necrophilia or cannibalism. He did, in fact, confess to creating his woman suit, made out of his victims. Ed confessed that it was due to his curiosity of being a woman. While confessing, Ed was apathetic, merely discussing these gruesome acts of violence as nonchalantly as ordering a cup of coffee. Investigators described Ed as without remorse, lacking emotion, and at times cheerful. A psychiatric assessment was performed on Ed during his arrest. He was diagnosed as schizophrenic with indicators of gender dysphoria. Now, I am not well versed in this, but it must be discussed. Gender identity is defined as having the internal sense of being a specific gender. Now, gender dysphoria is when a person feels a significant difference between their gender identity and their actual sex. Think of it as a person feeling almost like a stranger in their own body. It's an internal battle that occurs within a person experiencing this, which can cause a degree of distress requiring treatment. We also have to remember, during the 1950s, this concept was rare, unheard of, and seen as taboo. The era of the nuclear family could not wrap the concept of gender identity and gender dysphoria alone. Unlike today's society, where we have access to a myriad of information at our fingertips, Midwest America is pretty insulated from the rest of the world in the 1950s. Ed Gein pretty much brought these subjects to light with a stigma that affected that community. The woman's suit Ed created was an indicator that he himself wanted to be a woman. Ed was confused about his identity, and this suit fulfilled his curiosity. His diagnoses were directly attributed to his unhealthy relationship with his mother, Augusta. This was primarily due to his internal conflict about how he should feel about women in general. It was an emotional tug-of-war between his instinctual attraction towards women and the evil contrast that was instilled in him by Augusta. Ed's victims also had some similarities to his mother's features. When asked about his mother, Ed stated, "She was like no one else in this world." The way Ed spoke of his mother was reminiscent of the tale of Oedipus in Greek mythology. For those unfamiliar, Oedipus killed his father and married his mother, which then brought great misfortune to the family. Ed Gein was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, but was considered unfit to stand trial by reason of insanity. It would take nearly 11 years for Gein to finally stand trial after being treated at the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane and at Mendota State Hospital. The trial began on November 14, 1968, which lasted 1 week. He was found guilty on both counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan. Due to Gein being considered legally insane, he would spend the remainder of his days at Mendota State Hospital. He was described as a model inmate, taking up numerous hobbies such as rug making and ham radio operation. But some bad habits were still hard to break for Ed Gein. Nursing staff stated they would often catch him staring at them, obviously making them uncomfortable. Ed Gein died on July 26, 1984, of respiratory failure, secondary from complications of lung cancer. Ironically, he was buried in the same cemetery he stole his trophies from in Plainfield. But he wasn't alone. Ed was buried right next to his beloved mother, Augusta, the way he would have wanted it. The horrors of Ed Gein's crimes lingered in cinema for years to come after these events. In 1960, 3 years after the Gein House of Horrors was discovered, the movie Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock premiered in theaters. The scene of Norman Bates, immortalized by actor Anthony Perkins, emerging dressed as his mother. The parallels of character Norman Bates and Ed Gein are obvious in the film. Lived in rural areas, had controlling mothers that were dead, preserved their dead mother's room, and dressed in women's clothing. Psycho was basically a dramatization of Gein's life. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released in 1974, 17 years after the murders. The character Leatherface was loosely based on the Butcher of Plainfield. Silence of the Lambs character James Gumb, more infamously known as Buffalo Bill, who had gender dysphoria and created a woman suit out of his victims. Season 2 of American Horror Story Asylum, the character Bloodyface is based on Ed Gein. If you haven't watched it, what are you waiting for? I won't spoil it. But there is a scene where the suspected Bloodyface has a lampshade made of human skin. It is rumored that Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, the creators of the American Horror Story series, is set to release the 3rd season of Monsters, which will delve into the story of Ed Gein this fall. Needless to say, I am excited for that season. So stay tuned for more of Ed Gein on the big screen. If you found this story chilling, disturbing, or just fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which true crime case we should cover next. Check out my website for some true crime merch and some of my hand-poured candles that will relax you. This will help support my channel and bring you some more realistic dark tales. This was the story of Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield.